may interrupt US stream, even if it's on silent or on vibrate. People are about to join us online now. So, are we ready to go? We are. Great. Welcome to CFRI's National Cystic Fibrosis Family Education Conference, coming to you live from the Sofitel San Francisco Bay in Northern California. This is the second day of our three-day conference. Welcome to all online attendees. Our next speaker this morning is Isabel Stenzel Byrnes. Miss Stenzel Byrnes, or Isa as she's warmly known by many here, is a 42-year-old social worker with CF who received a double lung transplant over 10 years ago. Isa has worked as a social worker for families with chronically ill children and currently is a bereavement counselor, public speaker, patient advocate, co-author of The Power of Two, a tween memoir of cystic fibrosis, and a subject in the documentary film with the same name. Isa is also a phenomenal athlete, having just returned from the Transplant Games of America, where she won 3 gold medals in swimming and was voted Athlete of the Year. Whoop. Please help me. And please join me in welcoming Isa Stenzel Byrnes as she discusses a resilient character adapting well to change in our CF.
All right. Okay, I think I'm on. Wow, that was efficient. Thank you, Daryl. Got my water here. And it's really great to be here. I am incredibly honored to speak. I want to invite you all to take a deep breath because it's been a long morning already. And I've been helping the conference since 1992 when I designed the first t-shirt. And then since about the late 90s, I've been involved in the conference committee, and since early 2000, been the chair of the conference committee. And I always make sure I share my opinion about who I want to speak, who I want to invite. And I usually have my way. But I didn't invite myself. So I was formally asked by Sue Landgraf, and because she's the executive director, I could not say no. So that's why I am here with my multiple roles. I didn't just offer this so I could avoid paying the entrance fee. So a resilient character adapting well to change in CF. That is my topic because I think that has been my most difficult and actually wonderful opportunity in this path with CF growing up. I always consider cystic fibrosis as the greatest opportunity for resilience. So as Beth Peters spoke yesterday, I'm going to repeat a little bit about her, about what she said, and so that was maybe my mistake in designing this conference this year. It's like, oops, maybe I shouldn't be speaking, because we have very similar lives. And I have very similar lives to many people out there in the audience. So my main theme here will be resilience, and I'll share a little bit about what that is once I get into it. Oh, there we go. How cool. So who I am, this is the boring part. As Beth alluded to last night, it's kind of boring to say I was born this day and this is how my life unfolded. But for those who aren't familiar with me, my twin sister Anna and I were born in 1972, back in the day, and my mom is from Japan, and she's over there. Hi, Mom. And my dad is from Germany, and he's somewhere hiking in the middle of Washington right now. And I do have an older brother, Ruta, who does not have cystic fibrosis. And we were born and raised in Los Angeles, so longtime Californians. And I was diagnosed at birth after my twin sister Anna was born with the meconium ileus, the bowel blockage. And we were treated from the get-go. And really, as I look back at my childhood, I just remember having fun. I remember 1 or 2 hospital stays, and I remember the day I had to start treatments. But I don't remember a whole lot of other stuff with regards to the pain and anguish of CF. So that's the good thing about kids, is that we are wired for resilience. We're wired to be happy, unless there was some huge dramatic trauma, which I'm thankful I never experienced. Just like any kid, I had my tantrums and breakdowns and ups and downs. I was a basket case, occasionally still am. So I want to be sure to let you know that when I talk about resilience, it doesn't mean that I'm some sort of stoic, happy Pollyanna. Resilience means a whole lot more than that, and I'll get into that. So growing up, one thing that was offered to me was choice. I had the choice to create a life for myself despite the circumstances I was given. And so even though I don't want to stand up here at all and say, look at me, I was resilient, that's not the point of this talk. Sue did ask me to speak because she thought I might be a good speaker about living well with CF, so that's why I'm here. But just to give you some definitions, resilience is also known as stress resistance. Wow, that's an incredible asset to have when you have CF. Resilience is a capacity to respond to pressures and tragedies quickly, adaptively, and effectively. Adaptively, that's change. When there's change, we respond to it with flexibility. It's the ability to face life's challenge, whether they are huge tragedies or everyday disappointments, with flexibility. The Latin word for resire is leap back or bounce back. And really, when I talk about cystic fibrosis being an opportunity for resilience, we have many opportunities to bounce back, not only in pulmonary function, but emotionally and mentally, to bounce back from one insult or one fear or one anxiety, one after another over a lifetime. And I think many of us become pretty good at that. And resilience isn't just about bouncing back, it's about coming back stronger and with a greater purpose than before. It's about not just surviving, but thriving. So resilience is about adapting to change. And I really like this quote from Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one most adaptive to change. That is the only way to get through this any life, but especially life with cystic fibrosis. And life is about change. I mean, it's August. Summer is almost over. Soon we'll have a next season, winter. So, and the natural world has changed constantly. And so what makes us think that as human beings we're somehow exempt from change? That's not possible. We're just part of this. So one thing is for sure, change happens. I like this quote that says, living is a form of not being sure, not knowing what's next or how. So we guess. We may be wrong, but we take leap after leap in the dark. And so it is with our lives. We're not sure exactly how it will be for us, how it will be. Will my child be able to benefit from the ivacaftor or lumacaftor drugs? When will the next drug be available? Will my child be able to survive with a transplant? Will I be able to survive with a transplant? Will I be able to be a parent or a grandparent? There's so many questions we have about what the unknown in our lives. And so our great challenge is to figure that out and how to live with that unknown. So change is equal to loss. Some may not think of that way. I mean, if I sort of win something like Athlete of the Year, that's wonderful, that's a great honor, but is that a loss? Well, you can argue about that. For example, if there's a cure, if there's going to be really a cure coming up, is that going to be a loss? Well, it'll be a good thing, definitely, but it also might be a change in this. We might not need this anymore, this gathering of people. Some of us, every day that we're awake, our main passion is to sort of fight this disease and give our kids the best life they can give. Well, when the cure comes, what will we fight for? What will we have to live for? What will be our purpose? So there will be some element of change and loss even when the cure comes. All changes lead to some sort of anxiety and depression, and then we change our behaviors to cope with that. And some of our behavior change might be adaptive and some might not be. And so we figure out what works for us, and I'll talk about that more. So what's next? I mentioned a little bit about the drugs coming up, but these are all of the questions we have. What's next for me or my kid? Becoming an athlete, improving lung capacity is a possibility. Being cured or using oxygen, getting a transplant or getting a second transplant. Being unemployed, fighting addiction. There's so many possibilities in our life with CF that we don't know and can cause us great anxiety and uncertainty as we sit here today in this current moment. Excuse me, I'm a heavy drinker. So that's how I make my kidneys resilient. So given that we have all these changes coming up in our lives, how do we react to them? Well, these are some ways, and I've just put this out here as a list, some ways that we might react to change. One of them is worry, of course. Worry. How many here ever worry? Is it just me? I was number one at this one when I was little. Resistance. I don't want that. I got great lung capacity. I don't want it to change. I want it to stay where it is. And just pushing away the possibility. Denial, for example, that anything could change from now on out since I'm doing so well. Fear, great fear about what's to come. Fear of pain, of struggle, of suffering, of being a burden, things like that. How else do I react to change? I'll probably get depressed. I think many of us here would if things went in a negative change. And on the other hand, we have the opportunity to also welcome it, to accept it, and to adapt it to change. And now, the question that I ask everybody in terms of the habits that we develop over our lifetime, often learned from our parents, is we react to change in certain ways, and is it working for us? Is the way that we react to change working for us? Some of us may constantly deny that things are going to happen. No, I'm not going to get sick. No, my child's going to live a long time. No, her lung function will be safe. And we need to tell ourselves that, because it makes us feel good in the moment. But in the long term, is it working for you to deny a possibility of something not going well? And so as we adapt, we need to replace potentially maladaptive coping patterns with positive coping patterns that may cause some anxiety if we have to change what feels safe, but it might open up opportunities for other things. So when I was a kid, my favorite word today is opening to possibility, because when I was a kid, the only thing I ever thought about was getting sicker and dying when I was a young child. And granted, I was born in 1972, so that's what most people did. And when I would go in the hospital, I thought, okay, is this going to be the last time, or is this going to be how much more can I do this? How many more times can I go in the hospital, and how much sicker can I get? And so the possibility of actually being 42 and a bagpiper and 10 years post-transplant and swimming and winning 5, not 3 gold medals. Sorry. Okay, that's enough. That the possibility of good things happening never really occurred to me because I was so stuck in the negative, the worry and the fear of what could happen. And so I wish somebody came over to me when I was 12 years old and bonked me over the head and said, just think of the possibilities. Okay, then I might have said, oh, then that's called denial because I know what's going to happen to me. But here I am. Anyway, so how can we react to change in an easier and healthier and more resilient way? Now, we all have our habits of how we cope with challenge and difficulty, and if I dare say this, this is sometimes called our emotional baggage. And if we don't open ourselves to change it, then we probably have to carry that heavy baggage around for the rest of our lives. And CF, again, as I said, is an opportunity to unpack and to maybe add some new and lighter things into that suitcase as you carry it with you for the rest of your life. So for me, I think that how we think is our number one resilience resource. Of course we're going to feel. We're going to feel in response to what's happening to us in this disease. And sometimes we just don't have control over our feelings. They just come. Feelings to me are a form of energy, and they're a form of biochemicals that are inside of us that cause us to feel a certain way. But we do have control over how we think. And so I heard the statistic that 300 thoughts per minute enter our minds, our brains. And again, I mentioned this a little already, but we're a product of our past. And so how we respond to change is learned from early experience and safe patterns. So, for example, if for me, when I was little and I had started to catch pneumonia or have a pneumonia again, my immediate thinking response was, oh my God, I'm going to die, and this is the last time I'm going to be admitted to the hospital. And so that was my pattern of worry that started. And some of these responses are healthier than others, but others get us stuck. So being worried was something that I got stuck in for about 35 years. And our brains are capable of rewiring how we respond to stress. One of my favorite authors is Linda Graham, and she wrote a book called Bouncing Back, Rewiring Our Brain. It's called neuroplasticity. That if I can sit and do a bunch of practices in my own head, inside of myself, to rethink worry and repeat in my mind, I'll be okay, I'll be okay, I'll be okay no matter what happens. I'm actually changing the way that my neurons are connecting in my brain, and I'm capable of stopping the pattern of worry and starting a new pattern of I'll be okay, I'll be okay, I'll be okay. And so this is sort of a one slide for a 300-page book. But if you're interested in neuroplasticity, I highly recommend you to read the book. And I have resource information at the end of this talk. But that we are capable in our minds of changing the patterns that we've developed, maybe from our parents or from circumstance, that might not be the most adaptive to our coping. And let's see, anything else I have to say about this? Okay, I need to move on. So Linda Graham is my hero, and in her Bouncing Back book, she writes about the 5 C's of resilient coping. And coping is what we all have to do day in and day out as we face our challenge with CF or our challenge with anything, whether it's divorce or a family member that's causing trouble or whatever. Number 1 is keeping calm. Calmness is such an important coping strategy for resilient people. For cystic fibrosis patients, it's even more important. I do remember that I used to suffer from lung bleeds, and staying calm while you're having a lung bleed is so important, because if I freaked out, my heart rate would go up, my respiration would go up, and I would probably bleed more. And I needed to avoid that. So I had to just be calm, quietly and slowly walk to the refrigerator, grab some ice, put it on my chest, sit down, and calm down. And likewise, for any of us who are having breathing difficulties, if we start tensing up and getting really worried and anxious and so on, what does that do to our breathing? It becomes shallow and rapid and tense and tight. And that's not good for our lung capacity and our lung function. So staying calm despite the chaos that might be happening around us is one of the most important things we can do. Clarity is another important coping mechanism. Clarity, by that I mean that being aware of oneself, saying, I respond to this challenge in this way, and being able to look at yourself and review that and maybe reassess whether it's the right thing to do. Clarity is also seen that is having perspective. So no matter how difficult things are for you in the moment, there's always somebody who's worse off and somebody who's better off than you. Connection. Connection is so important in coping positively, and that is finding a network, finding a social support network. Connection also means finding at least one person who can love you just the way you are, and in that sense give you a sense of self-acceptance too. And then competence is another important part of resilient coping. if we can, number one predictor for success is a previous success. And so if we can figure out a way to do treatments and stay out of the hospital, that's the best motivator to continue to do treatments to stay out of the hospital. And so CF gives us constant opportunity to be able to practice gaining competence over things. If swimming a lot helps stop coughing at nighttime and keeps us out of the hospital, then we're more likely to continue to swim, and so on and so forth. And then last, but definitely not least, for resilient coping, we need courage, of course. We need courage to do something new every day. It might be scary to tell your friend in 7th grade that you have a disease called cystic fibrosis, but if you do it once and somebody is actually nice to you, then you're going to be able to do it again and again and gain a little bit more self-esteem that this isn't so bad. Your friend is not going to reject you. So I think a lot of things we can learn about resilience, we learn from children and also children's books. So one of my favorite books is that little book about I think I can, the Choo-Choo Train. And if we can just tell ourselves in our own minds this sort of simple statement, it can guide us to to find courage and to keep trying difficult things. So regarding CF, I'm trying to now make it more relevant to CF. 3 things I've noticed are required for resilience. And first and foremost is emotional vulnerability. If you're really Mr. Tough Guy and you don't want to be seen as weak and you don't cry and so on, well, probably this isn't the right disease for you. You can turn around and walk home. But actually, no, I mean, you have no choice. You're part of the CF community whether you want to or not. But being open to being afraid and crying and screaming and being angry and being pissed off at your doctor is just part of the CF experience. And rather than closing up and spending a whole lot of energy that we don't have energy to afford to pretend like we're okay and we're tough, releasing that and say, okay, I am going to be vulnerable, I am going to be emotionally fragile, is just part of the CF experience. And that letting go and acceptance of that emotional fragility is part of becoming resilient. Secondly, we talked about this yesterday a lot, is fostering hope, having optimism. Now, even though things could be really, really bad, lung bleeding, needing a transplant, being at the end of life even, there's still opportunity for optimism. And I'll get more into that later. And then third thing that's required for resilience is social support. And I don't just mean having a lot of friends, because a lot of us have a lot of friends on Facebook, right? 1,000 friends, 500 friends. But what I mean by real social support is being understood, being fully and completely understood, and having someone, at least one person in our life who gets us. You know, I've heard that shame is the great disconnector. And if we can tell someone what we're really going through and what we're really experiencing and what life is with CF is really about, that will connect us even at a greater potential than with any other friend that we have. So it takes courage to be that open. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead because I always preach to my speakers in the conference to use evidence-based research. So I'm talking about resilience, and I just want to throw this out there that there are many studies that show that cystic fibrosis patients, kids and adults, have more resilience than the average population. Is that a surprise? No, at least not to me. We are dealt a more difficult hand, and generally speaking, I think, rise up to the occasion and are able to find ways to cope with this. An interesting study by Petrie said that, teens with CF actually perceive stress as low. And that doesn't mean their stress is low, they perceive their stress as low. And it's correlated with higher resilience. Remember what the other definition of resilience was? Stress resistance. So somehow being able to see all of this difficulty in life, but sort of seeing it with a lighter touch. and saying, well, you know, I have a really good life. Never mind that I've been in the hospital 20 times, or that, you know, I have to go to clinic every other month, and I have all these other challenges and meds to take, and I'm worried about insurance after college. Teenagers with CF generally are doing all right. Yes, they are facing many other challenges, but according to this study, their perceived stress was okay. Stigma in one of the studies was correlated with distress. So the more you're ashamed or the more you feel CF is something to be embarrassed about, the more you're going to have anxiety or distress about that. Whereas if you're hopeful and optimistic, then you can balance the stigma and anxiety. Every time somebody presents a study up here, I always say, duh. So you might be thinking that too. Some of these psychological studies seem so obvious. But I just have to share them because they have actually done lots of studies on CF patients and how they've been coping. And generally, not always, but generally, people with CF do cope very well. Here's a study that talked about what are the resilient traits in people with CF. First of all, accelerated maturity. Have you heard that before? People with CF have to learn at a very young age how to deal with some pretty heavy topics in life, such as early death, you know, making an effort, taking care of one's body, discipline, being different, all of these things. And so we grow up faster. We have to take responsibility with all of our treatments. We have to somehow, some way, find acceptance in our prognosis, that we may live a shorter life, but here are the choices we're given despite that. We have to regain control. There's many families in this audience who have taught me how to regain control. You know, this disease takes away a lot of things from our lives, but it also gives us other ways to take control. For example, I'm going to put Anna Maudlin on the spot, who became a superstar swimmer when she was just a little kid, because that helped her not cough at night, and that helped her clear her lungs. Or Allison Best, who became a superstar ice skater because ice skating helped clear her lungs, and now that's her career. So there's countless stories out here of people who have regained control of their disease, and they're doing these great things, and maybe without CF, maybe they wouldn't be doing these things. So it was an opportunity. We have to redefine what's normal. Normal is so overrated. I mean, it's actually, my mother is sort of wonderfully positive, and when we were growing up, she just used to say, CF makes your life colorful. Like, well, yeah, okay, then I don't want to be black and white, right? So I just want to be colorful, and that's what CF offers. I talked about social support, and I added one more resilient trait here myself, which is problem solving. From the minute we arrive on this planet, man, poor parents, you have to start problem solving right away. Like, what am I going to do about this? And now I have to do this, and what about this? And the diaper doesn't fit, and and it just starts. And so we get so much practice from the moment we're diagnosed with CF to figure out how to be exceptional problem solvers. And we also know not to freak out when a problem comes up because we have practice. So a little bit more personal story. I tend to create these collages. I don't know why, but I like to have lots of pictures. And just to share a little bit for me, as I mentioned, I was diagnosed at birth. When I was 5 years old, my father sat me down and said, for every treatment you miss 1 day of your life. And so that was a really intense thing for a parent to say to a 5-year-old, but I got it. I got it, that this is a very serious disease, and I had to really pay attention to treatments. And then as I was growing up, my disease got more severe, especially during the teenage years. It just took complete control of my life, starting at the age of 12. So I had exacerbation after exacerbation after exacerbation. And at first I was doing 2 treatments a day, and then I was doing 3 treatments a day, and then 4 treatments a day. And at one point waking up in the middle of the night and doing a 5th treatment. Just setting the nebulizer full of medication by the bedside, setting in the alarm, waking up, turning it off, putting the machine in and coughing my brains out, and getting a nice bronchodilation, and then going back to bed. So no chest PT in the middle of the night. But what I learned from that was that I have the strength to fight like hell. Sorry, I'm saying that word. This disease was created to use four-letter words. So that I had potential to be that strong enough to wake up in the middle of the night for several years to say, I am not going in the hospital. I am going to beat this sucker. Because I didn't have transplant as an option. There was nothing else except to do what I was doing. And it worked. Because once my body finally grew, went through the whole puberty thing, and I caught up with the medical breakthroughs that were coming, especially Pulmozyme, life was good. I survived those difficult years. So I showed these pictures on the bottom with my sister. Well, actually, I'm doing my sister's chest PT. My parents are doing my sister's chest PT. Nobody can figure out whose butt that is, so I'll say it's Anna's. Then my husband was doing my chest PT. And so I'm showing those pictures because this was a family disease. We all did this together, and we all fought and did our very, very best together. So how did we become resilient as a family? Families are resilient when they adapt and prosper in the face of stress. Not all people attain resiliency in the same way. There are some family members that might use their religion or their faith, while others might use sort of activity, like doing things, fixing things, making things happen. Others might sort of go inward and just kind of do a lot of meditation or inner work. So the challenge in a family is that you all kind of have to get along and be a team and figure this thing out together. And that the families that do well are the ones where they're flexible in all of their roles, and everybody can take turns figuring out how to survive CF together. And then I mentioned I was in the hospital quite a bit as a child, maybe over 60 weeks in my life total. And back in the day, I'll say this because I can, at 43, back in my day, there was no bed for the parent to sleep in. So I was just there, and thankfully I had a sister, so half of the time she was in the hospital, but half of the time I was by myself. And being alone in the hospital was actually some of the richest time for me, because being alone allowed me to sort of really sit and go inward and think about how I was dealing with this and struggle with it inside. And rather than having people tell me how to deal with it, I had to figure it out myself. And so the quiet time that CF sometimes gives us is actually really helpful. And it might not seem like it. Maybe I might have said, oh, I'm bored, I don't want to be here by myself, I want someone with me. But in hindsight, looking back, that was really a valuable time. So again, I don't mean to say, look at me, I was resilient. I don't mean to say that at all. But all the literature focuses on resiliency in children who have certain attributes. And one of them is secure attachment to a caregiver or parent. So I was very grateful to have a wonderful mom and to have a wonderful twin who became my counter parent security blanket. So we were in and out of the hospital together often. Children's internal makeup, their personality, is often a factor in resilience. Those kids that are able to self-calm, which is often learned by being alone and being in distress alone, children who have positive emotions are sort of naturally resilient. Positive family, external support system, and then again, sense of control. Some of these things are just what the kid has, and some of these things are learned. So I always made sure that I had some sort of mental outlet when I was in the hospital. One of them was writing, one of them was painting t-shirts and selling them, or studying, calling friends for homework and getting the assignments and studying, because that always took my mind off what was really happening. And some distraction is actually really healthy. And on the other hand, some what would be called avoidant coping, saying, I don't have CF, I don't want to deal with it, this isn't happening. That's actually maybe more negative because it's also associated with poor adherence. But distraction is very healthy. because we can't sit around and think about our illness and woe is me and our hospital stay and our cough and our bowel movements all the time, because it's not life. Now this slide, it probably is the most important slide in this whole long babbling talk, because one of the things that helped me become resilient was learning how to navigate discomfort. And I'm sorry to say this to the young parents here, but having CF is uncomfortable. It is. But life is uncomfortable. What's the first thing we do when we come into this world? We cry. Do we want to try to avoid that? Well, then don't come into the world. Crying and breathing come together as we begin life. And so they probably will continue to come two and two together as we grow up. So I learned this from my CF peers in dealing with discomfort. Number one was do your I hates first. Has anybody heard this before? Oh God, I'm that old. So this is like in early 90s, somebody with CF shared this at a conference. Do your I hates first. And it has guided me to this day when I wake up at 6 a.m. and go to master swim team and I'm done by 7 and I'm like, oh, thank God, it's over. And just like all of the adults here have to do their treatments, if you do it and get it over with first, there's this huge sense of relief and lightness that we're done. Parents relate, I think. Next, dealing with discomfort is like flexing the perseverance muscle with all kinds of things that would give us toughness. Athletics is one of them, as I just started to do all this competitive swimming. Swimming and sports sometimes gives you great discomfort, right? Or is it just me? Like pushing as hard as you can, whether it's kicking in the pool or running on the track or, running with the ball or whatever, is not always comfortable. So if kids can practice sports and learn how to push through discomfort, that will help them in their CF journey. Another thing that my sister and I did navigating discomfort was sort of playing the comedy tragedy piece. And that is, we had this sort of bizarre sense of humor that everything was really funny. And that when our IV blew in the middle of the night and we had to go to the ER, we would sit and laugh about it because it was so ridiculous. That some parts of this disease are so ridiculous, they're humorous. And maybe that's just a coping mechanism, but we dealt with it that way. And also tragedy, I have to say, like at the end of my life with my husband, it was just such a tragedy that I would have to say goodbye to him. And there was something almost romantic about this life, that we were so in love, and I have this illness, and I was dying, and it just defining our lives as a comedy or tragedy removes us out of the picture, and we look at it with more objective viewpoint, and it's a little easier. Does that make any sense? Okay. Will to live and grit. Maybe it's because I'm German and Japanese, but I just really want to live, and I'm willing to work as hard as possible to make that happen. And I have to tell this funny story about discomfort, and that is like, I have an older brother who doesn't have CF, and we used to do some silly things together. He would fill the sink with really hot water, and my sister and him and us would like put our hand in it and go, fa, 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 and hold our hand in the water as long as possible, and whoever could hold it in there longest won. And then we filled the other side of the sink with ice cubes and ice water. Now you have to put our hand in and go, and then whoever held it in there as long enough won. And so we had this sort of ridiculous practice that pain was good for us, and that endurance was a great personality trait. And grit was a sign of strength, and it feels good. At least even that silly game felt good because we could prove our strength. And then, of course, facing pain with friendliness and curiosity is not something that I learned as a child, but when I was older. That pain and discomfort, again, if I sort of resist and push it away, it makes it worse. But if I could just open to it and wonder where it came from or wonder why I'm feeling it, it makes it a little bit less, a little more tolerable. And then my last thing about what I shared the story, being stronger than your illness is something that I've always told myself. So then I get to this, which is my favorite quote. Sigourney Weaver, Aliens, anybody? Remember this movie back in the day? So some of you might know the quote, but before she attacked the alien, she said, okay, let's grease this rat F son of a bee right now. Aren't I good? I have such great control because I'm online. But really, that we all need some sort of like mantra or sort of motto that we can use and bring up whenever there's something difficult. So my husband, like before I got into the swimming pool, he'll say, okay, let's grease this, which means go in and do your very best. Do your very best, and that's what I did. And that's how I deal with CF and transplant and challenges anywhere. Now I want to go back to this idea of change because this is the only anticipated change that you as parents can prepare for, which is transitioning. And just to share that my mother was very good about helping us transition. When we were 9 years old, she said, okay, it's time for you to learn how to take the bus by yourself. And you might be thinking, oh my God, that's like neglectful. But in Japan, there's 6-year-olds taking the train independently by themselves for hours. So we got onto the bus and we went somewhere. Anna and I were together and we got lost. So independence is often learned through error. And we somehow, without cell phones, my mother had to try to find us in Santa Monica, which somehow she did. But my mother taught us to equate developmental tasks of normal childhood with CF-related tasks. So when we were old enough to wash the dishes, we were old enough to wash our own nebulizer parts. And when we were old enough to talk on the phone, we were old enough to order our own prescriptions. Now we can do that online. When we were old enough to serve our own food, we were old enough to take our own pills. When we were old enough to drive on freeways in Los Angeles, I was about 17, I was old enough to go to the doctors by myself. So very, very obvious kind of things to match. So I think what made us different was we had each other and we earned our parents' trust. We made some mistakes, but we tried and learned all over again. Every child has their own pace. And according to the adherence literature out there, all the studies that they have done, persuading, AKA nagging, does not work for those kids that are suboptimal in adherence. But it's really important to address perceptual or emotional barriers to adherence. So I'm a huge proponent of counseling, of play therapy or individual counseling with kids. And all kinds of strategies do exist to help kids become more effective, more adherent. Which I don't have time to go into. For me, my number one motivator for adherence was I wanted to breathe, and if I didn't adhere, then I couldn't breathe. And my other motivator was my peers. My peers kept me going. But the gift of adherence is maintaining a happy and full life. So I did go to college and traveled the world and had a job on and off and got married. So the aspect of my life plan that helped was I had a plan A, B, C, D, E. And so if one thing didn't work because of CF, I had to go through another. It didn't mean my life was on hold or that things were a failure. Now, newsflash, the most effective way to learn resilience is by interacting with other resilient human beings. So if you want to meet resilient people, go to that table right there, and you'll be good to go. But my parents grew up 1940, Japan and Germany. Do I need to say more? They struggled, they suffered, but they taught me that we could endure any kind of life challenge. And resilience is contagious, just like happiness is contagious. If you can hang out with people like that, then you'll probably absorb it yourself. The CF community helped me the most, as I mentioned, if I was willing to be emotionally vulnerable in front of them. What I learned from my CF family was how to express my needs, saying, I think, I feel, I want, I need. If other peers can say that, well then maybe I can say that. Self-acceptance and self-compassion. Not always something I learned within my family, but really saying, you know, I have CF, but I am totally lovable despite having CF. Acceptance of others. We all have very different lives and very different backgrounds, but we have one thing in common. And if we can respect and love each other for our common challenge, well, then we can respect and love each other for the differences too. So I'm going to pause, but that is a silly picture of Anna and Anna, because if you ever want to know how to find humor in your life, get to know Anna Maudlin. And then finally, reaching advanced disease was of course it was uninvited, not something I wanted. And the challenge with this disease is despite all of our effort and all of the treatments and all of the discipline and doing everything right, we may not be rewarded. And so my lung function still declined, and that was one possibility. Remember the open door, being open to possibility? This was one of the things that could have happened. But what did happen was that it certainly brought my family closer and brought people closer to me, and it sure taught me what I was truly made of. Personal death awareness. Many young parents say, how do I teach my child to deal with the fact that life is terminal? And I found this quote, even though it's long, I'm going to read it. And it says, remembering I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life, because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remember that you're going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There's no reason not to follow your heart. That was said by Steve Jobs. And so if Steve Jobs can do what he's done and even say this, I think we can all learn a lot from his wisdom. And this is something we as CF adults and patients learn very, very early, that we need to follow our heart in order to make the most of the time that we're given. So my twin Anna and I also both got lung transplants. Anna had 2. And one thing that helped me make sense of the challenge of the end of my life and my new rebirth was that I discovered resilience by telling my story, by talking to people and also being invited to pharmaceutical companies and sharing the CF experience. Writing is a way to link my left and right brain together, linking emotional and rational and logical side of the brain. I became a character in this dramatic life plot. I could distance myself from what happened to me if I could see myself as a character. It helped me develop self-awareness, insights into behavior and understanding and making sense of what happened. And sharing writing, which is what I do in my job. I offer writing groups for people. Sharing the writing offers reciprocity and witnessing and a very, very special kind of intimacy. So hero's journey, I don't have that much time to say this, but again, if you can tell your kids to step back from what they're going through and imagine themselves as the hero or the heroine in his or her journey. And he's going to be going through some difficult times, just like, Frodo Baggins in Lord of the Rings. Like, everyone has some resistance to going through this big adventure, but if we push ourselves to go through it and endure the ups and downs and the trials, then we often come out a changed and better person. So these are some of the rewards in all of the struggles with CF, and I know many here have the same life to share, but we all are huge supporters of organ donation, so this is my little pitch. Those of you who don't know that CF and organ donation are linked, please consider signing up to be an organ donor. Gratitude is the hallmark of resilience, that no matter what, if the only prayer you say in life is thank you, then in your whole life that would suffice. That's one of my favorite quotes. That no matter how hard things are, we still have more to be grateful for than not. And resilience means facing and feeling both hope and despair at the same time. And so I experienced the hardest thing I've ever been through, which is the loss of my sister 10 months ago. And it was very, very difficult, and it still is. But I think that we never imagined to be 41 years old together, and so we're so grateful for the adventure that we had together. There. What has helped me deal with my sister's death, as well as many other challenges, is something so simple as this serenity prayer. My dad had this in our house when we were little, and it was in German, and I never really knew what it was, but we had this serenity prayer wall ornament about grant me the serenity to accept the things I can change, and accept the things I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so what an opportunity we're given in CF to do all the treatments, to go to the doctor, to learn all that you can. But after that, there's one element of this life that we just have to release and say there's aspects that are out of our control. Whether we want things to happen or not, they may still happen. One thing that has helped me through all of this is this concept of mindfulness, and I know this is really trendy and everybody talks about mindfulness, but it really does work. Focusing on the moment, not on the past or the future, and focusing on the moment with non-judgmental awareness and acceptance really helped and helps me to stay content with what I have right now. Mindfulness does not resist, but is open to all. And mindfulness accepts that everything is temporary and everything changes. So even if you're in extreme discomfort or suffering with breathlessness, that even that moment could be temporary, at least, if not physically, then spiritually. A friend of mine, a little 15-year-old, wrote this, the uncertainty of life, she has CF, find love, trust, and safety in the present moment. Claire Wineland, she's in Los Angeles and a really neat kid. Okay, I know I'm running out of time here. Resiliency and spirituality, in my opinion, go together because we all need personal philosophies that get us through the hard stuff and get us through life. So just to share this with you, life is hard and life is good. I've always put those two together. NUGIT, it's not some sort of new oral glucose tolerance test, which I notice is the same acronym. NUGIT to me is that I'm not the only one going through this. I'm not the only one going through this. Look at this room. We're all in this together. We're all struggling with the same challenge. I also did have a powerful near-death experience. I'm sure many of you are sick and tired of hearing about it, but I felt pure joy and ecstasy when I felt like I crossed over right before my transplant, and that taught me that there really isn't that much to fear on the other side. It's going to be okay for me when my time comes. But that I have a greater view that God has a plan for me, that this life is just one realm of existence, and that I am connected to something much bigger. So those kind of philosophies help me sort of deal with the real struggles in life. And I hope this makes you think of your own personal philosophies that get you through yours. So what are some roadblocks to resilience? Worry, which sucks up lots of energy for no reason in the moment. Anger that's misdirected. Obviously, appropriate anger needs to be dealt with to the person who is the perpetrator, but we can't carry that around because we just don't have the energy or time for it. Isolation and being disconnected. Hiding, avoiding, and escaping discomfort. I think we live in a society where we are encouraged to do that. If you're sad, take a pill. If you're, whatever. If things are hard, then avoid them. But in CF, unfortunately, avoiding often is associated with non-compliance, so that's really putting oneself in trouble. Helplessness is a roadblock because there's always something that can be done. Inability to express one's true self. What a shame, right? We each of us have a unique gift to offer to this world, and if we can't really truly share that, then we're not authentic. Inability to accept CF as part of that self, a small or big part. And then shame. I talked about shame as being the great disconnector. And then I think my main point here is to use these roadblocks as teachers. Everyone has a dark night of the soul. Everybody struggles at some point in time with, man, this CF thing really sucks. This is really hard. And it's okay to just sit in that, and because it's one of the normal stages in dealing with CF. Depression is a normal response to stress. CF is a stress, and we can fight it, flee from it, flight. fight, flight, or freeze, and depression is freezing. Depression is adaptive when it tells us to stop, rest, reflect, and reach out for support. I like this quote. I don't know where it came from, but depression is inspiration without form. So depression is telling us something. It just needs to go somewhere and come out in a form, and it can have a meaningful purpose. Getting stuck means rewiring our coping responses. So depression is a stop sign that says, okay, think about how you're dealing with this and start up again. And then my big motto was be strong enough to be weak. Be strong enough to be weak. That sometimes we don't want to admit that this disease is as hard as it is, and that depression does happen, and it's really, really hard to live with CF. But that's the most courageous thing we can do sometimes, is just to admit that. Questions to promote resilience in yourself. What am I being invited to learn from this experience? What are we being invited? What the heck is this kind of divine practical joke that's been given to us? What are we supposed to do with it? What gift can I share with others during this time? Those of you who have volunteered for CF service stuff, this is a great opportunity for you to give back, to make sense of it. How can I shift into a place of appreciation and gratitude for the time I do have with myself or my child? What am I guided to let go of at this moment? So if we can ask ourselves these on occasion when things get really tough, maybe it can help us find some new insight. So I like this definition. Resilience means overcoming adverse conditions by maintaining physical, emotional, and spiritual health for living life with joy, because that's the point of this all, right, Beth? Beth said this yesterday. And this is a plaque that I saw at the store, some gift shop the other day. Today is the tomorrow you were worried about yesterday. Phew, that's good. And recommended resources should be in your handout, I hope. And many of you already supported this, and thank you so much. The Power of Two movie and memoir, and the second edition is going to be released any day now. And lastly, I want to share this CF wisdom that a teenager sent me by email. I've never met her before, but I really love this quote. And she said, I try to live life according to these 4 words: desire, discipline, dedication, and determination. Without these, this disease is not beatable. Stay strong. Above all, keep breathing. So, let's grease this. Thank you.
Fabulous. Standing ovation. When I started coming to these 24 years ago, we didn't have adults up here with CF giving us words of wisdom. So it's just amazing to see the transformation over the years. And don't worry, I'm getting back on script. So, thank you, Isa, for your insights into resiliency in the face of CF. We won't have time for questions at this point, but you will have an opportunity to chat at the Ask the Experts panel tomorrow. This concludes our time prior to lunch. Thank you very much again to Isa Stenzel Byrnes. For those watching us via US Stream or CFRI Live, we will return at 1:15 tomorrow, Pacific Standard Time, for an exciting Ask the Experts panel with a Q&A with our conference speakers. Thank you for joining us. Now we have